We've been competing to become the next great spirit of the forest.
So what do we think of Bitoku by Devir Games?
So I'm a great fan of Euro games, and we both really enjoy the sort of artwork and style of Studio Ghibli type things, and enjoy quite a few Japanese styling of games. So this game of Bitoku seemed right up our street, and we were quite keen to give it a try. I know it came onto my radar around Essen of last year, sort of that October-y time, and I was sort of a bit gutted that we couldn't make it over to there so that I could grab my own copy. But since we've managed to get hold of one, and we've brought it to the table and had a little look, we have both watched some how to play videos and trawled through the rulebook as well, so we have pretty good idea of what's going on in the game. But how do you actually play?
So Bitoku seems complex, but it's actually quite simple. It's essentially a hand management engine building game with multiple paths to victory. Each player's got different yōkai, which are represented by the cards that they have in their hand. As you play the game, you get more yōkai and therefore more cards to draw from, because throughout the game, each turn you're going to place 3 yōkai on your board, unlocking guardians, which are in fact the dice. The game is divided into 4 years, and on every single year you're going to be unlocking a dice, placing that dice on the board to activate a certain benefit, and then hopefully advancing that dice to get an additional card you can use on a future turn. And you'll be doing that 3 times because you have 3 dice. In classic worker placement style, where you place your dice will reflect which benefit you get. So not only will you be able to build buildings, you'll also be able to unlock soul crystals that generate resources at certain points in the game, or you can save lost mitamas spirits by using dragonflies you find at the bottom of the board. Provided you've unlocked them on your personal player board, you can move your pilgrims across the main board, going on a little journey of self-discovery, or on your own Bitoku track, which you can build up below your board. As long as opponents haven't filled up all the spaces there first, any dice placed in a forest location can move across the river, which then allows you to pick up a Bitoku card which you can use to increase your personal track, or additional cards you can pick up to add to your personal deck to then give you more flexibility in future turns. So clearly there's a lot of actions you can carry out, and that's not even taking into account stones that you can place on your board and personal missions that you get at the start of the game. So as you're playing Bitoku, you're building up points as you go, but also at the end of the game you tot up all the points you've got from across the board to determine the winner. And that winner becomes the next great spirit of the forest. So I think whenever you watch a video on this online, or when you read any commentary on this, everyone talks about it just being super complex. And let's face it, the rulebook is more than 30 pages, but how complex do you think this game really is?
Personally, I don't actually think that this is a complex game. The problem is it's a very busy looking board, so I think when you first look at it, it can seem super overwhelming, and you're just kind of like, I can't see the wood for the trees sort of thing. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't understand the symbols and the bits and pieces and what's going to go where, and it just can all be a bit too much just at first glance. But that's really the issue. So it's the learning curve of, once you can read the board, you can play the game relatively easy. Yes, of course there's going to be some element of complex decision making to be able to sort of drum roll the turns to make this work with that, and that work with that, and that work with that. But you know, if you don't all play at that level, you don't need to be able to do all of those things to enjoy the game as it is. What you need to be able to do is understand the symbols.
There's so many different ways of getting points in this game, and the skill of playing it really comes from working out the best way to maximise your turn, because really you've only got 3 moves per dice per game. You activate the dice, you then place the dice, and if you are able, you then go across the river to then take a further action with that 1 die. So that they're all the really decisions you have to make primarily as you go along through the game.
Well, there's 4 years, and essentially if you maximise each year totally, which you are unlikely to do in all of them, you've basically got 9 turns a year, and then that is your lot.
And the complexity comes from which card you're going to play down to activate those dice, because that's going to give you an extra action. And there's a lot of things to think about as you play it, and I think that's what gives this game longevity.
Mm-hmm. It's very point salad,
but
for sure.
for new players, you're going to get points as you play. It's pretty much impossible not to get a point from your turn. You're not going to get the good symbiosis of cards that work together and necessarily that yield higher returns, but you're going to get points, and that's always a kind of appealing to someone playing a new game. Once you get your head around the symbols, once you get your head around what each different action place does, that's when it starts getting really exciting.
The board, now that we look at it, we know, oh right, okay, well this is where the dragonflies are, this is where we can cross over the river, oh, and this is the path you can take. So now we look at it, we know what everything is, we understand everything on there, so it doesn't have that overwhelming kind of, oh, take a step back, this might be a bit much, that I think some games, particularly if you're not used to playing the sort of heavier style Euros, or those that sort of combine worker placement with deck building and all of those kind of things, if you are used to those sorts of games, this isn't going to be too much of a challenge for you.
And I think the board looks majestic, it looks lovely, and I think the appeal of the game is largely due to its art. That certainly made me want to learn the game and enjoy the game. But the reality is, you only really got to pay attention to the kind of middle chunk. the bit above the central section you may not ever do if you don't get to advance your dice. The bit below really is just a selection of what are you going to buy, what building are you going to buy, what rock are you able to pick up, what crystal can you gain. So if you just pay attention to the middle bit, that's really where the meat of the game is.
Yeah.
But having said that, I don't have a big problem with them devoting such a massive board to the art, because it looks great.
Gorgeous. Every card, so pretty.
It's a thoroughly luxurious kind of production. From the wooden tokens with the screen printing, even almost unnecessary, the advancing the years. You remember how many times you played, and the reality is the season marker, you're pretty much only doing summer. So, I mean, for spring, the season action is draw some cards. That's all you're doing.
And then for winter, you're just sort of reset the
board. So they're largely...
But you get these gorgeous tokens just to be able to do that, and that it does add something to the game to have those pretty little elements that just like, oh wow, yeah, we'll move that.
I mean, as I said, if this game was just beige, I wouldn't be half as excited about playing it. And I think that excitement is needed, because yes, you do have to invest a bit of time to really get the hang of this game. No one should judge it on a first play, and of course a game should be enjoyable from the outset when you take it out of the box, but really this game yields repeated plays.
Yeah, and for me, as we played it, it makes me want to play it again and again from the outset, even though, the first game we're going back to the rule book because I want to know the nuance of, does this card come to my hand? Does it do this? Or have I done this correctly? And I need to double check to make sure I've done all those things. So it is a bit stop-starty on our first game, for sure. Even though we've, had a read through and we've watched some videos, I just like to know that I'm doing it right, so I want to double check, which I'm sure you find a bit frustrating.
I'm keen to kind of, particularly when you've mapped out what you're going to do. And Bitoku depends on timing much more than so many other worker placement games, because you're limited on obviously where you can place your dice, because you then, if someone's placed a really strong dice there, you need to match that strength with an equally strong dice or exceed it. And suddenly your plan's hinging on going to a certain place and then advancing and then getting a bonus, then be able to place a second dice in a different place, or you're waiting for your opponent to cross the river to free up the space that you need to go to that they previously were on.
I was waiting till the end to cross the river.
Because you knew you'd planned out what I wanted to do. But it's more than games like, say, Arnak or Teotihuacan. There really is this pressure on timing, and not just when you're going to place your dice on the board, but which order you're going to use your cards to get your dice out.
Are you going to cross the river early to get a new yōkai card that you could then use that turn, which could be a benefit to you because the card that you've got isn't really going to help what you're doing at the moment. But by crossing the river, I'm allowing him to come in and take the action that I currently am holding up space for that he can't then do. And I know that he wants to take the walking sticks and go on a little journey. So it is that sort of tension between, what do I want to do? When do I want to do it? Can I time it with what else I need? Can I stop you doing what you want?
There's a lot of kind of open-handedness about Bitoku. I mean, you know what your opponent's trying to do, and I think that works really well too, because you pay attention to what the vision cards are. You know you're going to need to do this to maximise your points. And with that knowledge, you then have this idea of, okay, well, she's going to have to do that. So if I chuck all my dice out quickly, that's going to block her options and really restrict her for this year group. And it's kind of thought processes like that only come from repeated plays. You don't have those thoughts on the first play because you're just trying to work out what to do and where to go and
how it all combines.
And it's once that clicks into place, this game becomes great.
Which doesn't take more than the first play. You've just got to get through that play, checking on all the little bits and bobs, working out, putting that puzzle together in your head. So then when you come to the next play, it is actually quite smooth, quite easy. It is a steep learning curve, some have said. And I do think doing that first play, yeah, I'll agree. But from that point on, I don't think it is. Once you've got over that hurdle, it's not a mountain, it's just a bit of a hill. And then it has all clicked, it is all smooth, and you're ready to go with the next game. You know what everything does, you know how they all work together, you know how you can sort of maximise this, and it's like, oh right, this is my vision card, I'll pay attention of that at the beginning because I forgot about it last time. The different things like that all slot together easily.
We've played at 2.
Yes, yeah, only at 2. And I think it does play. It has its own board for 2.
But that's what's great about I mean, one side of it is just a 2-player game. On the other, it's a 3 or 4-player game. And what's really clever about the game and what's incredibly well designed is you can slot bits into the board to change the board to make it optimised for your player count. It's great that exists in it.
Yeah, definitely. And I would be interested to see how the tension of going to places, blocking things off, changes at a higher player count. And I appreciate that the game will be a bit longer, but personally I don't mind a longish game sometimes if I know it's going to be one that I really enjoy. So
you're not going to bash through this quickly. Even at 2, I think someone said it's an hour per player, and I think that's probably realistic.
I mean, I think you get quicker the more you play it. So I would fully expect that once we've sort of played it a couple more times, we might get that down to sort of 45 minutes each. And I mean, that's reasonable for an easy night kind of thing.
People talk all the time about the complexity of this. I think even games that are considered to be kind of accessible, family-friendly, entry point kind of worker placement games like Arnak, it's not a big leap from that. It's really a case of understanding what options you have and how to maximise those actions. And
I think it has some similarities to Arnak in the way that when you're sort of trying to move up the track to do your magnifying glass or your journal, you're kind of got to think ahead of, right, okay, so I've got that guardian that I've defeated over here that I need to deal with this turn, but I also want to move up here because I need that bonus to help with that. And it's that kind of, right, I need to get this to do that and that to do that, and I'm going to have to do that first because I need to do that. That thinking that happens in Arnak, you're going to need to extend that a little bit for this. If you're going to do particularly well, but I think that's the kind of thinking that can develop as you're playing a game like this. As you play more and more of it, you'll get better and better at.
And I think the more times you play it, the more you enjoyed it. Admittedly, when I first played it, I was much like so many people. I was overwhelmed by it, and I thought, well, I can't quite see what the fuss is about. But I always I
pushed you through.
Yes. I do find the measure of a game is how keen you are to play it as soon as you finish.
Straight away.
And with this game, it was a case of almost as we were packing it away going, do we really need to put this away? Can we not just fit in another game another day ready to go? Because it's a bit of a table hog and there's a lot of bits in it. But that again is a kind of double-edged sword, because the more bits in it, the better it has for longevity, the more options you have to enjoy this game over and over again.
And the more beautiful it is.
Yeah, more cards means more beautiful art. But certain games, you do have to think, similar kind of worker placement games, how much life is there in those? Because if there's not a lot of options on what you can do, you quickly fall into a pattern of an optimised play. unless someone interrupts that process, you're largely going to win against most people, unless you get a bad order of cards or a bad, almost a bad roll on certain games. But in this, there's so many options, so many different approaches you can do that aren't luck dependent. That's what's great about this.
Yeah, and I think there are so many things that will change the way that you choose to take your path in this game from the outset. You might have a different rock that will make you think about doing something differently. You might have a different vision card early doors, and then that just changes everything for you. Or which Bitoku cards come out will change then again what you might be trying to do. And in one of our games, I was very much having a lovely little time in a rock garden, and there were lots of butterflies swarming around me, whereas you were off on several long walks and thinking about your future visions.
I drawn Bitokus at work. I had a lot of kind of movement cards that dictated that play, which isn't an approach I'd played before. And suddenly it's like, I admit I didn't win, so it wasn't the best technique, but I then knew how to optimise that in a future game.
But interestingly, you were quite far ahead before we got to final scoring. Yeah. And I was sort of starting to panic because I don't like this losing business. But it's interesting, different paths will score during the game, or the way I played that particular game, I got a lot of scores towards the end of the game because I had all my pilgrims down surrounding my rocks. So I'd maximised all of that. And then I was sort of going, right, 8 points for this and 8 points for this. And your face starts dropping as I'm kind of leaping ahead and ahead.
My lead is carved away ever so. But yeah, I think it's largely kind of 50-50. I think half the points you get as you play the game, the other half you get as you do the end of the game. Yeah. So and it's incredibly finely balanced. I think there's never been a big gulf between our points. It's always been a case of largely, it's been a close one. It's been a nail biter every time we've played, and it's difficult to read who's going to win it.
We keep each other at bay.
Yes, and it's those levels of strategy come from repeated play.
You just have to, I think, appreciate that the first game you get to the table is going to be a learning game, and your actual first play, you don't even have to, I suppose, actually go through the whole game. If you only did maybe 2 years out of the 4, you learn so much just doing that and pulling out the paces, working through the moves, to then do a quick reset and then play, and it will be so much smoother.
I can think of few games that have been as rewarding, as worth putting the effort in. It might have been because of the art. It might have been because I love that Studio Ghibli, the Hayao Miyazaki look of the game.
And we also really, well, I mean, not me particularly, but you sort of growing towards it, really do actually enjoy that sort of hybrid of it's a worker placement, but you're also doing some deck building, and you're also doing a bit of that, Armax up the top for us. We really love June, and a lot of those games have that sort of combined bits. Essentially you're worker placementing, but then you're also having to think about doing some other bits and bobs at the same time, and this really hits that nail on the head and hits the Japan that we love as well. So
it's a game that for me I'm pleased we stuck with. But if you are new to this game and you've just opened it for the first time, what tips do we have that are going to give you that leg up, that entry point that's going to help you enjoy your time playing Bitoku?
We're certainly guilty of sometimes not really reading the rule books, going through a lovely video on YouTube that's great of how to play, and then just going straight through it. And I think with this game, it's really good to have watched some of those, but you are going to have had a read through the rule book as well. And I think having a good look through the player aid that's got all the symbols carefully, maybe don't set up the game as an individual, try and do it together so that you're looking at the symbols, oh right, these are the dragonflies, and then you put them out, so that once you actually start playing the game, you are more familiar with some of the symbols of different things, which I think don't always come across well on some of the videos that you might see. It doesn't sort of get into the brain, whereas I think you need that from
Yeah, this game has a wonderful player aid that you need by your side when you're playing this the first time, because yes, there's a lot of symbols there. So just being able to flick through and go, okay, that symbol does that, especially as you can see it and not have to ask, which isn't going to kind of give away your game plan.
Definitely.
But my tip would be to remember this game isn't just get workers out, it's get your workers out at the right time. It's about seizing that opportunity, grabbing that space when you need it, but also know when to hang back and allow someone else to advance over the river to free up spaces. This game, more than other worker placement games, it's all about timing. It's getting the right people at the right time in the right places. And if you can nail that, suddenly you're going to find yourself scoring better and better and better.
I think as you start the game and maybe you're feeling slightly confused or overwhelmed and you're not really sure what to do for the best, have a look at your vision card and you can see the symbols there of what it's asking you to do, and that's going to get you points at the end of the game. Have a look at the rock that you got to start the game with. What does that do? Does that help you? Does that mix up with your cards? And that really gives you a little bit of guidance as to where to move to first before you sort of piece things together in your head as to what else is working within your hand.
And I think try not to do everything. There's a lot of ways you can get a lot of points in this game, and as I said, you can chuck a worker down and probably get some points. But if you focus on a few specific things that you think your cards are going to lend yourself to getting high yield points from, focus on those. Don't worry so much about the rocks. Don't necessarily go on a jolly if you don't need to. Maybe pick two. Look at your cards and think these are going to work really well with achieving those two kind of point goals. And if you focus on those, you're going to get quite a lot of points by the end of the game. Don't just think because everything's on the board I need to do it all. Do the ones you can do best and try and get the biggest amount of points just from those.
One problem I fell into whilst doing mine was I was placing my pilgrims in my rock garden, and I had a couple left doing some little wanderings around, but not very many. But I didn't really have many crystals. So at one point I had a bit of a panic where I hadn't got any pilgrims left because I hadn't freed them up by placing the crystals. So, you know, take the opportunity to get crystals onto your board, which, I mean, Julian had done brilliantly and got crystals next to his yōkai cards, so every time he placed a card he was getting things in, and I wasn't at all, and I was starting to panic a little bit about that, but it worked without doing that. But I still needed the crystals to give me the pilgrims, so don't forget that, you know, you've only got 3 to start with, and once you've used those up and either sent them to the rocks or sent them off on a walk, you're going to need some more.
And finally, I would say you never really need a full quantity of cards. Don't forget, at the end of autumn, you can trade in a card either for points or for their own ability. As long as you've got enough cards to make the 5, you can start selling those off, and you're only going to get a chance throughout the whole game to sell 4. So if you end up with sort of 10 cards in your hand, you're missing out on a whole wealth of points you can get from just trading those in at the end of a turn. If you're never going to use the benefit of them, get them out of there and pick up the points. So hopefully we've helped you decide if Bitoku by Devir Games is the game for you. I think if you play with 2 and you're used to heavyweight Euro games, this could be right up your alley. And I certainly can't wait to get it to the table a few more times to explore new techniques and strategies.
No, me either. I'm ready to table it right now. If you've enjoyed this video today, we'd love it if you could give us a little like, or perhaps even subscribe to the channel. That'd be fantastic. We really appreciate that. We'd love to hear all of your comments about Bitoku. Have you played? Would you like to? What did you think of it? We just love hearing from you all.
Yes, do let us know if this is the game that's going to spirit you away.
See you next time.